Good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just give us one moment while we have everyone start to trickle in. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to Congresswoman Scholten's virtual town hall. We're grateful that you can join us as she updates you on the latest from Washington, where she's currently waiting to vote, as some of you might be following along with back home. My name is Ricky. I'm the Congresswoman's Chief of Staff and the moderator for tonight's call. We are so glad to be joined by Muskegon Mayor Ken Johnson for remarks, who I will turn it over to first, but quickly I will let you know how the format for tonight's call will work. So Congresswoman Scholten and Mayor Johnson will provide remarks and answer your questions. If you have a question, you can hover over your screen and submit it via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will get to as many questions as possible. With that, for the sake of time, I will hand it over to Mayor Johnson.
Good evening, good folks. I am Ken Johnson, Mayor of the magnificent city of Muskegon, and it is so good to be here with you all, and especially with our Congresswoman Scholten. Always a joy to be working with, and whether in person or virtually with Congresswoman Scholten, and really appreciate you making Muskegon a priority in your engagement and your team's constituent services as well. Of course, unfortunately, we weren't able to meet in person last month due to some security concerns, and Congresswoman Scholten's team made the difficult but necessary decision for the safety of our community to reschedule that. And so that's why we're here now virtually, and Congresswoman Scholten is working diligently in DC, and that's why we have to be here virtually right now, but working diligently on the behalf of our community and protecting our interests. And so it is a bit surreal right now, well, for many different reasons in our country, but being the mayor of Muskegon and seeing the juxtaposition between what's happening in Muskegon and what's happening in West Michigan relative to what's happening in DC. There's a lot of exciting progress happening and here locally and regionally. We've got a lot of momentum, and things are moving forward in a lot of positive ways here, but that momentum and that positive movement is being potentially jeopardized and at risk due to some of the actions and decisions that are occurring in DC right now. And that's why it's so critically important to have fierce advocates for our community to ensure that we have the resources and supports that are needed here. And so that said, I'm just happy to be here. I'm going to keep this short. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. And I'm available to answer any questions that Congresswoman Scholten and her team wants to defer to me. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And I am so proud to introduce Michigan 3rd District's voice in the United States Congress, Congresswoman Hillary Scholten.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Thank you, Mayor Johnson, for joining us. Good evening, West Michigan. It is so good to be with you all tonight. A special hello to Muskegon, where I would have been having this town hall in person if I was back home. But of course, as you can see, I am here in Washington, D.C. We got called back last night to vote on the Republicans' so-called big, beautiful bill that they are jamming through Congress. I will tell you, it is anything but beautiful. After a few flight cancellations, I made it here to Washington on a pre-dawn flight this morning. And I am standing strong with my Democratic colleagues to fight for the American people. You might have seen earlier on social media, I posted a video with a binder full of letters from 15,000 different Michiganders who reached out with concerns about losing their health care. This is a truly terrifying time right now as we think about what is at stake. So it's an honor to be here, even if I can't be back with you, because this is what you sent me here to do. I really want to thank you all for your well wishes and your understanding after having to reschedule the town hall last night after my name was found in the list of possessions on the Minnesota shooters list. As a mom and as your representative, safety is a top priority to me. And given the recency of that news and what we were still figuring out, it seemed best to postpone that event. I can assure you, we are going to keep working to make sure we can have an in-person town hall very soon in Muskegon. So I will not, and I was not then, and I will not be now, be deterred in standing up for my community. That's why we found a way still to connect with you here about the timely issues facing us in Washington, D.C. I host monthly town halls because I know how important it is to take your questions live and to be able to interact with you. Town halls give us a chance to do two things. One, I can report back to you on what I'm doing as your voice in Washington. And two, most importantly, I can hear directly from you on your concerns, your struggles, and how I can fight even harder for you. And that's what we're going to do a lot of tonight as I take your questions and answers. So I know folks are feeling really frustrated and want their elected officials to hear from them. My office has received literally thousands of calls expressing outrage at the direction of our country right now, indignation over President Trump's actions, and fear over whether they or a loved one might lose access to healthcare or Social Security or their housing. It's real. I hear you, and I'm fighting for you. Let's look at the facts, right? This is not an irrational fear. In just the past 6 months, President Trump has sent the US military into our cities without a state's consent in California, an act that we have not seen a president take since 1965, when President Johnson sent troops to Selma, Alabama to protect civil rights activists marching from Selma to Montgomery. President Trump has spent 45 million of your taxpayer dollars on a military parade for his birthday, all while cutting funding for Medicaid and veterans benefits and so many other things. Despite running on a promise to lower costs, Trump has implemented erratic and harmful tariffs that sent the stock market into chaos, losing $10 trillion of people's accumulated wealth and retirement savings. These tariffs are estimated to cost the average American family close to $4,000 a year. We've also seen Republicans in Congress, at Trump's request, cut funding for childhood cancer research, for Medicaid, SNAP, and other lifelines that American families truly depend on. Folks, the list goes on, and that's not even mentioning the more bizarre things like posting AI-generated photos of himself as the Pope or his faith advisor selling miracles online for $1,000 a pop, and so much more. It's deeply un-American and unbecoming of the office of the president. These are facts. This is real. This is not hyperbole. And I'm not saying these things as a hyper-partisan member of Congress. I'm deeply bipartisan, consistently ranked as one of the most bipartisan members. I will literally work with anything to get good things done for the community, but that also means standing up for the community and calling a spade when it's called for. I have been working nonstop for you. I've introduced bills to hold Trump and DOJ accountable, protect your taxpayer data, end corruption. I recently announced my Integrity in Government Act that would set up a nonpartisan political watchdog in the office of the White House, something that is long overdue. I've also sent over 50 letters to the administration calling foul where they have run astray. Many letters which have been successful in curbing dangerous cuts to critical programs that keep us safe. And we have conducted hundreds of individual and constituent cases on behalf of you all who have been impacted by the policies of this president. At a time when Republicans are pulling funding, delaying critical projects, and hurting American workers, I have fought back and one. Earlier this year, the Grand Rapids Airport reached out to my office about DOJ holding up $16 million in TSA funding, which would have critically jeopardized a project there, as well as scores of jobs. And we reached out, we contacted the TSA, we fought back, and we got that funding reinstated. I cannot and I will not allow this country to be hijacked by a wannabe dictator and his billionaire buddies. We are not a nation of kings. And that is put in crystal clear perspective this week as I am here suspending time that I was supposed to spend at home with my family, with you all, because I am going to push back and make sure that West Michigan does not register a vote for cutting Americans' health care so that they can pay for tax cuts to billionaires. I know many of you are feeling tired and angry. I know you're scared. And that's why I wanted to hold this convening tonight. Still, the only West Michigan member of Congress that is willing to do live town halls like this, whether virtually or meeting in person, to hear from you and assure you that I'm doing everything I can to stand up for your interests. But I can't do this alone. Your voices matter so much. Keep demanding answers, keep asking questions, keep showing up to events like this so that we can all engage together. Because demanding a government that works for you, for all of us, and not just the most powerful, is how we will keep and maintain this democracy. It is truly the honor of my lifetime to get to be your voice in Washington. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to some Q&A so that we can make sure that we are listening to you and answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It looks like we've had a few people jump on, and as such, we have a question from Grace asking why the town hall moved to being virtual tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grace, for your question. I would have gladly been with you all in Muskegon tonight. We were planning to do it until yesterday. I got a call that said, you got to come back to Washington. Republicans want to put this big, beautiful bill on the House floor. And we've taken a couple procedural votes already today, and it looks like at some point between now and midnight, we will be coming back in to vote on final passage of this bill. So I'm here in Washington in an unexpected time to vote. So this is just this is the essential part of the job, and I promise you we're going to get back to Muskegon to do an in-person town hall as well. So thanks, Grace.
Thank you. The next question is from Mary V, who asks why you aren't providing oversight to ICE and just expresses some concern about what's going on with ICE around the state and around the country.
Yeah, we absolutely should be concerned about what is happening. Not only do the president's actions raise serious constitutional concerns, they're deeply immoral. The way that his mass deportation program is harassing and intimidating even United States citizens in their communities. It is deeply problematic. We are providing oversight, through legislation. Obviously, I don't sit on any of the committees that has direct oversight capabilities on ICE, but as Congress as a whole, we are providing that critical oversight. I have co-sponsored numerous letters. I'm a co-sponsor of a great bill introduced by Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, where a lot of this problematic activity is happening, as well as Adriano Espaillat, who is the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, which requires ICE agents not to wear masks, to have their face open and visible, an essential step for accountability. So, I apologize if you feel like you haven't been hearing a lot of those accountability actions. We want to make sure you know about that. Make sure you are following us on social media, reading my newsletter, and staying tuned on my website as well, where we put out a lot of that great information. But As Democrats, we need to speak out against violations of federal law wherever they exist. And we need to provide real solutions to this immigration crisis. That's why I have been a champion since my earliest days in Congress of a bill called the Dignity Act. It's the only bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform bill in the House. We're getting ready to introduce Dignity Act 2.0 for the 119th Congress in short order, because one of the most critical ways that we can ensure that individuals are safe in their communities is by bringing our immigration system into the 21st century. I think it's also really important to note, I'm here providing the oversight to stop the funds from flowing to ICE in an unaccountable manner. In the bill that I'll be voting on later tonight, that I've already been voting on today, ICE's budget is more than doubled, totaling $169 billion from its current budget of $68 billion. That's you all, us, that pays that. That is an additional bill to the taxpayers to fund this program, which, by the way, is also currently underwater on the American by the American people. Don't just take your Democratic member of Congress's word for it. Trump's signature issue was immigration. In many ways, it's what propelled him to win this election. But since he's come to office, his policies are deeply unpopular. His approval rating on immigration is underwater, as is ICE's. This funding that is going to ICE is also going for things that we know are, not only arguably unconstitutional, but deeply ineffective. The bill includes $45.6 billion for a big, beautiful wall. The American people are putting groceries on their credit cards. We can't afford to be paying for Trump's vanity project of building a wall on the southern border, something any immigration expert will tell you does absolutely nothing to secure our southern border. So thank you for the great question. I am going to continue fighting for a safe, fair, just, and humane immigration system.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. The next question is from Allison Y. for both of you. Allison said that she's a Muskegon resident, and one of the most valuable resources in Muskegon are the Great Lakes in all of Michigan. The elimination of critical NOAA funding will affect all Michiganders. In particular for Muskegon, the proposed 2026 budget calls for the closure of a Muskegon Great Lakes facility. This directly affects employment in her household. How are you both going to fight to keep the Great Lakes NOAA funded and relevant?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to answer in, but I know Mayor Johnson, you and I have talked about this quite extensively, and you've been doing some great work on this already. So I actually want to toss it over to you to talk about this importance in Muskegon, as well as some of the things you've been working on, and then I'll weigh in as well, because I've got some great things to share.
That's a great question. The health and vitality of the Great Lakes is so incredibly important to Muskegon, all of Michigan, and so many other communities throughout our neighboring states and Canada, across Canada. And the funding of NOAA services is not only has an economic impact here, but also in terms of providing services that help and support so many different businesses, as well as the safety of our community. And so it's incredibly important to have that funding continue, not only that funding, but other funding like Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, GLRI, which was a critical source of funding to restore Muskegon Lake, get it cleaned up, get the 9 beneficial impairment BUI's beneficial use impairments resolved, so that is a great start. Funding it pertains here in Michigan, hopefully concentrated in Muskegon as its headquarters, and the NER is a National Estuary Research Reserve, so that provides additional funding and technical capacity and supports for wetland and estuary restoration and preservation. And so one of the ways that I, as a local official, have been working to advocate for preserving funding or expanding funding, such as with getting the Brandon Road project, interbasin project, moving forward down in Illinois, which protects the Great Lakes from invasive carp, has been working through the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, which is an organization made up of over 300 communities, mayors and chiefs in Canada, the United States, and First Nations and tribal nations. And so Muskegon has been actively involved in that organization in recent years, and I was just recently elected to the board of directors for that organization. And so, we've been to Congressman Scholten's office advocating during Great Lakes Week for the importance of these resources and continuing supports to preserve the health and vitality of our Great Lakes. So continue to work with our federal legislators, continue to work with our partners in neighboring states, as well as neighboring provinces in Canada and First Nations and tribal nations, because the health and well-being of the Great Lakes is so incredibly important to all of our communities, from an economic to a recreation to a cultural perspective in so many different facets. The water undergirds the well-being of each of us individually, our communities, and the ecology and wildlife habitat. And so continue to work with our partners across the board. But it is concerning, the prospect of losing funding and losing services. But that also requires our community to be strong advocates and contacting their federal legislators and contacting the White House, contacting as many people as DC, and advocate for the importance of this funding, because it matters. We do have great representation with Congressman Scholten and other partners in DC, but it really does matter that we at the local level as individuals are advocating, because that collective voice is powerful and impactful, and it does work. So I encourage all of us to continue advocating and engaging.
Thank you so much, Mayor Johnson, for that great response, and Allison for the critically important question. Mayor Johnson, if you can, I'm going to get into some of the cuts and why they're happening and my position on them, which is don't do it. But one of the things that the federal government is saying when they talk about making these cuts, they say, well, the state and the municipalities will just be able to pick up the slack, right? Can you speak at all to, the extent of Muskegon to sort of step in and protect its own waterways in its budget if they don't have those resources coming in from the federal government?
That's a great question, and it's something that I have discussed with some of my colleagues here at City Hall, whether elected officials or our professional staff, in terms of how we might be able to step up. It's a question that we get from our community too, in terms of environmental enforcement and monitoring. And I've had those conversations internally of like how we can do some of that our own in partnership or complementing the work that the state and the feds do. But we don't have that technical expertise and that technical capacity and the resources to fund that, even in a supplementary capacity. And so that's why it's so critically important that the work of NOAA and other agencies continues, because we can't replicate that. We can't. Yeah. We don't have the technical capacity. We don't have the dollars to do it. It's so incredibly important to have the feds do that.
Yeah.
And our state partners.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, Allison, you get a group of West Michigan lawmakers together and you ask them, how important is it to you to protect the Great Lakes? Everybody would say, oh my gosh, it's so important. It's so important, right? But when it comes down to deeds or putting your money where your mouth is, that is where the rubber truly meets the road. The bill that we're going to be voting on later today, as well as the rescission package and the 2026 budget, do not reflect those values. We are seeing incredible losses in resources coming to NOAA, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and Republican colleagues are voting for that, even those here in Michigan and in West Michigan. When I came to Congress, I wanted to serve on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and specifically the Water Subcommittee, where I now serve as the vice-ranking member, because I wanted to be able to work on water policy and I wanted to be able to advocate for the resources that we needed back home. And that's what I've been doing. When we marked up our version of the 2026 budget through House Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as the portions of HR1 in the House, I introduced amendments to protect Great Lakes funding, saying, okay, even if you want to do all this other stuff that you're doing, I also introduced healthcare amendments to try to save our healthcare. At least can we save this portion of the Great Lakes funding? So every step of the way, I have been fighting to keep that funding in the budget, and Republicans have voted against it. So, when somebody tells you they support the Great Lakes, that's a nice thing to say, but we need to follow that up with actions. And I'm very proud. I am the first Democrat in the better part of a century to hold this seat. Taking away a vote that would have said, okay, we can slash this funding, with someone who's saying, no, we are absolutely going to invest in protecting this critical resource. And, I'm sorry that this is impacting you and your family. It sounds like in a direct and personal way. I want to remind everyone, our office is always here as well for constituent services. If you feel, there's something that our office may be able to help you with on that front, or you just want us to know your story, we'd love to be able to share it if you're comfortable with it as well. You can feel free to reach out to our office. Ricky's going to put all the contact information in the chat there. But thanks for the question. One quick thing I want to share too. I was like, I won't go into too much specifics, but specifically when DOJ tried to reach out and when they wanted to go after the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which is tasked with eliminating invasive sea lampreys, a huge, massive threat to our $7 billion fishing industry. I pushed back. We wrote a letter. I know sometimes Democrats right now are like, Democrats are getting criticized for saying, a letter doesn't do much. But it does, right? It raised awareness. We got press coverage on it. And they stopped. They didn't cut $7 billion from the fisheries, which, I saved dozens of jobs to ensure these invasive species don't completely demolish Lake Michigan. So again, thank you so much for the question. If you have other specific ideas or insights on programs that we should really be honing in on and pushing back on, please reach out to our office. But this is a fight that I'm all in for. Thanks, Allison.
I just want to quickly add to that, if I may, that the question of protecting and preserving the environment and the well-being of the Great Lakes and the ecology, it cannot be a partisan issue. It cannot be a Democrat versus a Republican issue. We have to have that transcend partisan politics and realize that this is for the benefit of every single one of us. And that in the first Trump administration, when there was an attempt to eliminate the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, that it was due response to so many people advocating on behalf of those resources, and Republicans and Democrats coming together saying, no, we're going to fund that. We're going to restore those dollars. And that's what it takes. We have to be all in on the health and vitality of our Great Lakes and the environment.
Yep. I after we did this letter, we got a little sea lamprey from, can you guys see it here? Look at these things. People know what these are. Look at their mouths. They suck onto other fish and they just completely destroy our fish ecosystem. I can tell you as an angling family, this is really, really important to us. So anyways, thank you. Thank you for the question. I know we have a lot of others, so I want to make sure that we can connect on that. But in case you can't tell, I could talk about protecting the Great Lakes all night.
Thank you both so much, and thank you, Allison. If you turn to the chat, you can see that we have the phone numbers, addresses of both of our offices, as well as the link to Congresswoman Scholten's YouTube series, Straight Talk with Scholten, as well, so you can subscribe. Our next question, I'm going to combine two. We have questions from both Pat and Amy about AmeriCorps. So the question is asking, with current threats to AmeriCorps funding, would you considering sponsoring legislation to protect AmeriCorps? And how do you feel about some of the programs that are being threatened that help our seniors stay independent?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's clear in, again, there are so many ways that the budget is being attacked by the most vulnerable. The One Big Beautiful Bill is one big portion of it, but there's also rescission. There's also the 2026 budget, which, takes a huge cut out of that. There was also the continuing resolution, which passed earlier this year. Attack after attack after attack on our seniors. The AmeriCorps Seniors Program truly provides a lifeline to so many in our community, and eliminating these programs is harmful and will leave vulnerable seniors without critical support and companionship. I joined my colleagues in a bicameral letter opposing the reduction in force efforts at AmeriCorps agencies earlier this year. We just cannot pull the plug out from underneath our neighbors at a time when they need it most. One thing to note in the one big beautiful bill, some lower income seniors enrolled in both Medicare and Medicaid could be directly affected by the Medicaid cuts. They could lose their Medicaid coverage, which helps them cover Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket costs. They, are also at risk of losing benefits that they receive through Medicaid, such as long-term care and dental services. There's also a whole host of other provisions that have, an impact on seniors' health, nutrition, and independence for millions of Americans. Like, again, the severe cuts to the Medicaid, which impacts the overall health ecosystem, and restrictions in SNAP, which would increase hunger in our senior program and placing a greater pressure on already stretched services like Meals on Wheels, which again are not getting the full funding that they need. This is one of many reasons why I made it a point to be here personally in Washington to vote against this bill. We're at a place of margins right now, and every vote counts. The votes are not proceeding right now because Republicans don't have them, because they have such a narrow majority. And by being here and holding their feet to the fire, we're able to prevent them from just running roughshod over our seniors.
Thank you so much. The next question is from William B., who asks, how quickly will we feel the impact if the big bad bill is passed?
I think it depends on who you are and how these programs are going to impact you most, right? I think some of our most vulnerable individuals could start to feel the impacts almost immediately, right? If your SNAP benefits get cut. If you happen to be a more well-off individual with savings, and you are someone who might just lose a portion of your Medicaid coverage, or you won't lose SNAP altogether, but it might go down just a little bit. You might not start feeling the effects of it until they might be delayed, right? Just a little bit. But many individuals will start to feel the impacts almost instantly. This bill cuts $1 trillion in healthcare funding through Medicaid, Medicare, and the ACA. 17 million Americans, many of them our neighbors, are going to lose their health insurance through this program. And this also will place a disproportionate strain on our hospitals, especially our rural hospitals. We know that Muskegon County, and as well as other parts of my district, if we have others tuning in, more rural parts of Ottawa and Kent County as well, they're going to feel the strain there, where a disproportionate number of the users of those rural hospitals are Medicaid recipients, and these rural hospitals are not going to be able to stay open. it's deeply troubling. And again, why I am here, why I'm speaking out against it, and opposing it at every single step.
Thank you so much. The next question is one that's gathered from a few different questions, which is asking about accountability for the current president and his administration when he's doing things that some of the people who are on today's call see as unconstitutional.
I think one of the things that we have tried to do in so many different ways is to elevate what the Republicans in Congress and President Trump are doing, because part of the approach of this administration has been something called flood the zone. And they want to do so many things all at once that they think Democrats or even members of the House, who obviously provide oversight to the executive branch, can't act, because they're just absolutely flooded with all the bad quasi-illegal, quasi-unconstitutional things. So it has been my focus to find and stay laser focused on those things that are clearly and unequivocally unconstitutional, and to join in amicus briefs. I'm not a lawyer. I can't, I am a lawyer, but I'm not a practicing lawyer right now. And in this capacity, it's not my job to sue the administration and bring them to court, but I've signed on to amicus briefs where the House is directly impacted. We push our committees to hold oversight hearings. We write letters, we do news conferences, so that they can't escape public scrutiny. And I understand why people would feel frustrated right now, because it feels like the administration is able to just accomplish so much of their goals. But one, I will tell you, they are losing in court. Over and over again, the administration is not getting what they want in its entirety, right? And so there is accountability there. And in Congress, right? Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate. But we were called here to vote on this bill, and it's been several hours already, and they can't get it done. Why? Because I have been raising alarm bells about what the impact of these healthcare cuts are going to mean to the American people. And the individuals who aren't sure they want to vote for this bill yet have heard about it, right? And so that's what oversight can look like. Even though we're not in the majority, we can't say, oh, we're going to have a hearing and we're going to call this administrator in. That is not within our purview right now because we're not in the majority, but that's not going to stop me from shining a light on this illegal activity.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. All right, our next question is from Susan F., who asked if you've discussed the healthcare cuts in the big bad bill with local hospital systems and community health centers, and she's worried that the budget might break our healthcare system as it currently stands.
Yeah, Susan, thank you so much for the question. I absolutely have. I've conducted, I think, 3 different press conferences now at hospitals and a federally qualified health center and local clinics with doctors, healthcare providers, as well as other elected officials to raise awareness and talk specifically about what those healthcare cuts would mean. Additionally, one of the first things that I did in this Congress when we knew that Republicans in the trifecta would be coming for healthcare, one, because they campaigned on it, and 2, repealing the Affordable Care Act was Trump's #1 goal in his first term. He couldn't do it because of the courage of John McCain, who famously voted thumbs down, protecting millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions by keeping the Affordable Care Act intact, which I will be the first to say is not a perfect healthcare system and still needs improvements. But it was the piece of legislation that we needed to provide these critical protections and ensure coverage for these individuals. So one of the very first things that I did was to create a panel of advisors, a healthcare advisory board, so that I could hear directly from doctors, nurses, practitioners, social workers across the district for whom they would be directly impacted, as well as making myself available to anyone through my newsletter, these town halls, and doing numerous visits to healthcare facilities so that we would hear directly from them. And overwhelmingly, it has been their voices that has just encouraged me to continue fighting on this issue morning, noon, and night. We're taking meetings in Washington and back home, not only from our constituents, but from people across West Michigan who reach out and say, I'm so concerned about these healthcare cuts, but my member of Congress won't meet with me. We know how unheard people are feeling by the Republican Party right now, and I'm making myself available to listen to them as well.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question is from Kaylee. I'm going to summarize it a bit just for time. Kaylee believes that the spending that the U.S. sends to Israel is far too much money right now, and says that if we spend the money domestically, then it could go towards education, healthcare, and other issues. So she's wondering your thoughts on spending, especially in light of what's going on with Iran and Palestine right now.
Yeah. I think on the whole, it is very hard to, justify funding for things outside of our border when we know at home domestically, Americans are having a hard time paying their, heating and cooling bills, keeping up with, just basic home repairs and paying the weekly grocery bill. More Americans than ever are putting groceries on credit cards because things are too expensive. One of the things that I think is, needs to be said about the situation in the Middle East right now, particularly, the extensive suffering in Gaza, is, that it is absolutely heartbreaking, and we have to do something about it. And it can't come from the United States alone paying for this. I am deeply heartbroken by the suffering and death of innocent civilians who are caught in the crossfire of this war in the Middle East. Humanitarian aid, which should come from a multitude of sources, must be dispersed swiftly and safely to the Palestinians living in Gaza. I believe that the only way to ensure lasting peace and security in the Middle East is through a two-state solution there. It is something that I have been working on since my first days in Congress, and that I commit to continuing to work on. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. The next question, going back to our beautiful Michigan environment, is a question from Rory T. Rory is wondering if the cuts to the bipartisan Great Outdoors Act and diversion of the Land and Water Conservation Fund monies are still included in the newest form of the bill, or were they removed after folks mobilized against the public land sale element of the bill, which I know you spoke out on, Congresswoman.
Yes, we were very, very vocal about this because even though the Senate provisions only specifically attacked the Western states, excuse me, not West Michigan, we knew their overall plan is to do this anywhere. And Michigan has one of the highest numbers of acres of public land of any of the Midwestern states. So we are doing everything we can to keep them in there. But yes, Republicans in the Senate added an absolutely insidious provision into the One Big Beautiful Bill that would allow the Trump administration to sell millions of acres of public land. I strongly oppose this provision. And it's our duty as Americans to protect our natural resources, not just for the select few, but for all of us to enjoy. I'm sure right now, as we're talking about this, everyone is picturing their favorite public land and where they go and what would happen if we couldn't visit it anymore. It's just incumbent on all of us to continue speaking up, but because I can tell you, they're not done, and they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop there.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question from an anonymous attendee, which is a good reminder that if you have a question and you don't want to put your name to it, you can feel free to submit it anonymously. We have time for a few more questions. This question is, how big are the SNAP cuts in the Republicans' bill? And does the Senate bill put the burden of funding SNAP back to the state of Michigan and localities like Muskegon?
Yeah, so the one big beautiful bill would shift more of the financial burden for food stamp programs onto the states. My question to Mayor Johnson in the beginning about the cuts are, how can you absorb these, right? Now SNAP is not something that the state or that the city would be covering, but Mayor Johnson, I wonder if you can speak just a little bit to like food needs and hunger in Muskegon. And if these SNAP benefits were to go away, the existing infrastructure that you guys have, we visited the farmers market when we were out there, and we saw just the incredible demand. Speak just generally to hunger in Muskegon and how the ability of the city or the county or the state to absorb some of that if SNAP were to go away.
Yeah, food insecurity in the Muskegon area is significant, and we, by definition of the USDA, exist in a food desert, and so we don't have consistent, reliable access to fresh food and produce here in the area. We do have a fantastic farmers market. The Muskegon Farmers Market is the is second most visited market in the state after Detroit. And we have a lot of farmers throughout West Michigan that do utilize that farmers market and sell there, and over 10,000 people that come through every Saturday for that, and then also on Tuesday and Thursday for Farmers Market Day. One thing I do want to reinforce or share, and July is Double Up Food Bucks Awareness Month, actually, that there is a program that if you have SNAP, that you can get up to $20 matching, so turning $20 to $40 that you can use for buying fresh fruit and vegetables at the farmers market. And so strongly encourage everyone to take advantage of that. And that's each market day, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So you could potentially turn $60 into $120 to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. Now, that could be put in jeopardy if funding is cut or pushed solely onto the state, because right now that's funded through a number of sources, fed, states, and philanthropic. And even with SNAP and Double Up Food Bucks program, there's already a good amount of philanthropic effort to provide food trucks or food pantries. So there's these supplemental resources already out there, and there's still a need. And so we can't just shift that responsibility and that onus solely on to the local communities. That you need to have these additional resources coming from the federal government to support our farmers, but more importantly, make sure that our residents in our community have access to the fresh foods to nourish their minds, bodies, and development. And so it's so incredibly important that that's not put in jeopardy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've visited so many food banks and food pantries recently, and overwhelmingly people are saying, listen, we really we're grateful for the philanthropic efforts when they step up, but this is no way to feed a community, because you don't know when the generosity might strike, right? They need a dependable line item budget, and SNAP is not there to pay for all of everyone's food costs, but it's there as a social safety net. That is exactly what is intended to be, and to catch folks when they fall on hard times. So, it is deeply, deeply troubling. The Senate bill, which we'll be voting on, a little bit later tonight, includes expanded work requirements, mandating that, quote, able-bodied adults must work up to 80 hours a month, up to age 64 to receive their benefits. This is a 10-year additional decade boost from the current age limit of 54. Now, listen, if you ask in theory, right, should able-bodied individuals be working to get this supplement? I don't think anyone has a problem with it. The problem is most individuals who are receiving SNAP benefits are already working. So the work requirements are already there naturally. These reporting requirements, however, add an additional onerous burden. And I can tell you from a casework perspective, they are rife with mistakes and errors. And because of the massive cuts at, whether it's the USDA or Health and Human Services, these when there's a mistake in the denial of an application, individuals can go weeks without getting an answer, and the system is just not set up for that kind of overview. So it is really, really important that we continue to push back on these cuts, because also, as you mentioned, Mayor Johnson, this is important for our farmers, right? They rely on these benefits to keep a steady supply for their crops that they're producing. My team sent me a note. Rory, just circling back quickly to your public lands question, I just wanted to mention, I think I got so caught up in how mad I would be if they started selling Michigan public lands. I want to state very clearly, while it was included in the Senate version originally, it was ultimately stripped. But this is an idea that they are not giving up on, and they want to bring it back. So, that's why we're not sort of resting easy, even though it is not in this Senate version currently. So I want to state that clearly. But we do know that they're trying to bring it back. So it won't be in this particular bill, but bring it, well, unless somebody from the House introduces it, which we don't think they will, but keep an eye on it, because it's definitely an idea that is coming back. So thanks.
Thank you so much. We have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to tie together about 5 or 6 questions in this next one, which is, how is Congress supposed to check Trump's power when he ignores both Congress and the courts, introduces a lot of executive orders that the courts then strip down, and he doesn't seem to listen to them? There are quite a few folks on here frustrated by that and looking for your thoughts.
I couldn't agree more. And, I think that there's a couple different things that we need to do. Just as, the president seems to be coming up with, crazy new ideas all the time, we have to continue to come up with our own smarter, better, stronger ideas. That's why with several of my colleagues, I started a congressional oversight committee that is, or a caucus, excuse me, that is going to be focused on integrity in government. My bill that I introduced as a part of that, the Integrity in Government Act, strengthens checks and balances by installing new oversight measures for the White House. Congress's power to conduct investigations stands on equal footing with its authority to legislate and appropriate. And I'm going to continue to fulfill my oversight responsibilities to hold this administration accountable. In just a few weeks, I'm going to be pushing our Ways and Means Committee to initiate an oversight investigation into certain tariff policies and how they impact blueberries. So stay tuned for that. But we are continuing to agitate and to push. And, I think you all also have a critical role to play there. The very reason that we don't see this bill that we're waiting to come to the floor right now there is because you all have been doing such an incredible job pushing back. Gerald Ford, who was my predecessor in this seat, used to talk about the 4 branches of government. We know about the 3, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. They are co-equal, But in a democracy like ours, there is also the fourth branch. And it's the people. And you all raising concerns, engaging with this office is what helps to provide the critical oversight that this president needs. And one of the things that I think this administration in particular wants us to feel is powerless. But I refuse to believe it because I have seen the ways that my voice matters, that your voice matters. I've seen how the administration is losing more than they're winning in the courts, and how a feeling of fatigue or giving up because we feel powerless will only enable this administration to do more. So I refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe that we are powerless because I see how much power we can have. And that's what inspires me to keep going every day.
And the last question is the perfect closer on that, which is from Marjorie saying, I protest, I write letters, I call your office. What more can I do?
Marjorie, thank you. Thank you, first of all. You are doing it all. Being here is so important. I deeply believe that, our democracy depends on responsive representatives who will show up and do the work, listen to their constituents, but also you all. I just talked, about the fourth branch of government. Engaged citizens who are asking questions will continue. And it can be frustrating to feel like it's not making any progress. No fight that was worth winning in American history, from abolishing slavery to women achieving the right to vote, even as we look to celebrate, the founding of our great nation, was not won overnight or in a single battle, and there were major setbacks. When I set out to serve you all in Congress, I didn't win my first election, but I also didn't stop there because I knew that West Michigan needed a voice that was reflective of the values that we all share. And that is why it is an honor that I get to be here to cast the vote that I'll cast later tonight on behalf of you all to say, no, we're not going to sacrifice our well-being, our health care, so that the Trump administration can hand out a windfall of your tax dollars to his billionaire buddies. And I'm going to continue that fight onward and forward. And I thank you all so much for joining me and being with me in that.
Thank you so much. I see a question just came in asking if you were talking publicly about this bill, and I just want to direct this person to the chat to the right with all of your social media, your YouTube page. Where are the best places to keep up to date with everything the Congressman is doing, which does include speaking out very, very publicly about this bill and the harm it would have on West Michiganders.
Yeah, fantastic. And if you're not a social media user, but you do have access to the internet, you can go out and look on our website where we have that information. We also issue a newsletter, and I have been on local news. I just did a bunch of interviews yesterday as well when I was at a groundbreaking for a new veterans facility that we have. I also did a bunch of interviews about what this bill will mean. And I was on some national news shows last week as well talking about it. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter where we compile a lot of those clips as well. But as Ricky said, she's putting them in the chat right now. So I want to turn to some of our closing remarks so we can be responsive to your time as well. But again, this is not the only time that we have. You continue to reach out to our office and we'll engage with your questions. We will, Lord willing, if the Republicans don't call us back, surprise again, be having another in-person town hall next month. And we're going to continue showing up in ways like this because being here is just so important. Thank you for showing up. Making your voice heard is incredibly critical to my work in Washington. Keep calling, keep sending letters, keep sending notes, the good and the bad, though, certainly on hard days, we'll take any votes of support that you like as well. These next 4 years are going to be long, no doubt, but the only way that we're going to get through them is together. I'm not even close to giving up, and I thank you so much, West Michigan, for being here and engaging as well. I hope you all have a safe night and a safe, happy, and healthy 4th of July. Take care.